Thank you for visiting the YouTube channel for bestbiblecommentaries.com. In this video, I'd like to show you one of the best reviewed commentaries on the book of 1 Corinthians. Before I do, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel so you can see videos on Bible commentaries, study Bibles, and other resources that help people understand God's Word. Authors Roy E. Ciampa and Brian S. Rosner are the authors of the first letter to the Corinthians in the Pillar New Testament Commentary series. The Pillar series is edited by New Testament scholar D.A. Carson. This volume was published in 2010. It is 922 pages in length, making it one of the longest 1 Corinthians commentaries available today. Roy E. Ciampa is a professor at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary in the United States. Brian Rosner is a professor at Moore Theological College in Australia. The book is co-authored, and as they explain in the preface, the two men have been friends for years, and their work on this volume resulted in a unified view of 1 Corinthians. D.A. Carson says about these authors, their work is careful, sometimes innovative, always eager to listen carefully to the text, and written with clarity readers long for. Based on aggregate reviews, the strengths of this commentary include hermeneutics, historical and biblical theology, and the way that the authors tie in Bible-wide themes to interpret the book of 1 Corinthians. Roy E. Ciampa did a question and answer with me on this volume on my website, bestbiblecommentaries.com, and I'll put a link in the description box down below. So after you're done watching this video, please read that interview to learn more about this volume in the words of Dr. Ciampa himself. The example passage I'll show you comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and I turned right to it. And every heading in this commentary is in bold and is part of an outline of the text. So 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 13, the heading is Instructions Concerning Subjective Idolatry and the Downfall of quote-unquote the Weak in Corinth. That is followed by the English translation of the text, and then more detail to the outline. A, love must take priority over knowledge, chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. Then on the left-hand side of the page is chapter and verse reference in bold letters. So it's easy to find what you're looking for when you use this commentary as a reference tool. Chapter 8, verse 2, chapter 8, verse 3. And then the next part of the outline, Christians, unlike pagans, acknowledge only one God and one Lord. Chapter 8, verses 4 through 6. What you won't find in this commentary are illustrations, such as pictures of archaeology or pictures of Christian artwork. You will not find maps or photographs. What you will find is outlines of the text, exegetical diagrams, and the authors also include theological reflections, ministry reflections, and devotional reflections. So the commentary does not have a separate section for application like some commentaries do today. The application ideas are woven throughout the discussion of the text itself. The two example passages that I will talk about that people might want to know about before buying a commentary on 1 Corinthians is, what are the author's views on tongues and their application for today? So one of the things that the Apostle Paul talks about in chapters 12 through 14 of 1 Corinthians is tongues, and sometimes commentators have different views on the application of tongues for today. So what do Ciampa and Rosner think? First, there is a lot of discussion on this particular topic regarding the history of tongues in the first century, and also some of the historical interpretation of this issue in 1 Corinthians. As far as modern day use is concerned, or modern application, the authors don't argue strongly either way. I don't think either side of that issue, I don't think either side of that discussion will be offended by what the authors say, but neither side will find a strong defense for their position in this commentary either. One reviewer of this volume, Craig Blomberg of Denver Seminary, another commentator, he says that the authors delicately walk the tightrope between cessationism and Pentecostalism in this commentary. So that's a good way to say it. They delicately walk the tightrope between cessationism and Pentecostalism. The other example passage that I will cite that people might want to know about is 1 Corinthians 14, verses 34 and 35. And those are some controversial verses which say, "As in all the congregations of the saints, women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church." That's 1 Corinthians 14, verses 34 and 35, and I read from the NIV translation. So commentators have different perspectives on those two verses. If you pick up 5 different commentaries on 1 Corinthians, I would not be surprised if you read 5 different ideas as to the meaning and relevance of those verses today. First, the authors Rosner and Ciampa say that the verses are not a later addition. So some commentators will argue that those verses were added later and they're not actually from the pen of the Apostle Paul. One well-known commentary on 1 Corinthians, Gordon Fee, actually makes that argument that the verses were added later. Ciampa and Rosner disagree with that. They first of all, they take about 15 pages to have this conversation about these two verses. It takes about 15 pages of the commentary for them to work through all their thoughts and their teaching. They argue that the verses need to be understood in context, and they should be interpreted within the big picture framework of orderly worship. There is a theme of orderly worship in 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14. Commentators are in agreement on that. And these authors say that is the best lens through which to view these two verses. So they relate to that bigger theme of orderly worship, and they're not as connected to specifically tongues, prophecy, or teaching in particular. The authors don't think there is universal application for these two verses, that it was more contextual. They say that the verses call for a different set of concrete behaviors in our churches that would have been expected in the first century. So they say that to apply, we're misunderstanding the text to apply these verses literally in churches today. They say that on page 729 of the commentary. And then on the next page, they suggest that it might be more scandalous for a woman not to speak in church today, and that would be more problematic. So they see the churches as more describing a first century application than a 21st century application. And that's just kind of a preview of the 15 pages they use to address this particular topic. So hope those two examples are helpful to you in understanding more about this commentary. Thank you for watching this commentary. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you so much for visiting bestbiblecommentaries.com.